This is The Elder Scrolls Online. We're on Xbox Series X, taking a look at the optimization update that has finally arrived. It was supposed to come out last week, but it is finally available today. And of course, I'm once again joined by my expert here.
Joelle, gamertag to Kitty Cat.
And she's going to be kind of explaining aspects of the game, talking about it, and going over things. But first off, I'm just going to quickly give you the details of, what's kind of changed here, what's been improved, while you're also seeing that in action on the game. And in the corner of the screen, we're just going to briefly put up a little bit of text so that you can see, hey, this is the performance mode, or here's the resolution mode, which is kind of our two options here. You're going to be able to do, well, not resolution, it's the fidelity mode. But these are two choices. So if you go for the fidelity mode, it's kind of similar to what we've seen in the past. This is, your 4K resolution, but this is a native 4K resolution, but it's at 30 FPS. I'll also mention that we do have HDR support for the different mode options, and this doesn't change whether you're changing the various modes, it's just applied there. There's also the performance mode, so this gives us a native 1440p at 60 FPS. And then there's a number of features that I'm going to quickly talk to, and we'll talk about these more and explore them as we go over this sort of, gameplay update for the actual game. But there's quite a few things that have actually been changed in the world to really make this a great long-term sort of experience when it comes to the quality and the visuals of the game for the next gen console, basically, which is, I think, fantastic that they're continuing to update this. And they just had the Blackwood DLC, I believe it was called, and we're going to check that out a little bit later, right, Joel?
Yes, we'll for sure talk about Blackwood, which is the most recent chapter that just dropped in June, which is super exciting. They also have a lot of new game changes that have come with this chapter. But speaking of just the Xbox Series X and the fact that ESO is going to release an enhanced version for the Xbox Series X/S, as well as the PlayStation 5, is very exciting because not only does it improve performance, but it also improves the game's visuals, which really is quite amazing. I know, back when I was playing Skyrim and you could add mods, texture packs, and, improving graphics was a big thing that I would do. So it's really cool that ESO is staying up to date, putting these new, visuals and graphics and textures to really keep the world alive and, keep up with the changing, gaming world.
So with that, I'll kind of quickly go over the different features and options that are being added. So these are for both of the features, as far as I've seen on the various notes. We're getting an increased draw distance, almost doubled. We're having unlocked textures, so high resolution textures are added to the game, updated anti-aliasing, smoothing out the foliage, the grass, the structures. There's going to be improved reflections, the addition of planar reflections, improved visual depth and realism. This will vary in performance mode. Improved ambient occlusion with screen space global illumination. It upgrades the game's SSGI, more realistic and more natural indirect lighting, broadly boosts the game's shadows as well. There's improved shadows generally, like I mentioned, and the shadow resolution is doubled and is set to the PC Ultra setting, so the shadow distance also increases as well as the quality of those shadows. There's also an improved depth of field, so this enables circular depth of field to the highest setting, a circular bokeh effect, creating smoother and more realistic background views, particularly when you're interacting with the NPCs doing the chats. Finally, but one of the most important things, at least I think so, is the improved loading times. Much faster, and it basically cuts your loading times in half, which is kind of exciting.
Yes, the loading times is super duper exciting. We did notice a little bit of an improvement just with the new console with loading times, even before the optimization, which was awesome. But, with this optimization, improved loading times is going to be great, and I am so excited to hopefully not get this will be an unusually long wait time anymore.
Yeah, it should definitely help out the game. I think a ton. Just in general, games this gen have been just snappy and smooth. And these are even older games that are not necessarily specifically designed for next gen right off the bat. These are older games getting newer features, and they're already improving greatly. And just like having this snappy loading, especially basically being cut in half of what we've seen, to me is truly exciting for this game. Just keep in mind, obviously with it being online focused too, your loading is still going to have to connect server wise. But let's jump into basically, the meat of talking about the game. Give us a general overview, Joelle. What is The Elder Scrolls Online?
So The Elder Scrolls Online is a game where you can explore the world of Tamriel, which is where all of the Elder Scrolls games take place for the most part, as well as, interesting Daedric realms such as like Cold Harbor, and in the Blackwood patch we're now exploring the Deadlands, which is really cool. It's basically like Skyrim but blown up.
That kind
Yeah.
of brought me into another point here, because it is an MMORPG, massive online.
Hmm.
It's basically, a lot of people say it's like Skyrim, but there's lots of people running around. Let's quickly kind of break it down a little bit further. For those coming from Skyrim, will they feel at home? And then after that, for those that maybe haven't played an Elder Scrolls title before, what does this game feel like?
So if you're coming from Skyrim, it might feel a little bit awkward at first because, yeah, there's all of these other people running around the world. But in terms of being able to quest and venture and discover, ESO still has that feeling for sure. There's also, a lot of things you can do. Like the level of quests changes from like main storyline quests to side quests, and then there's daily quests. So there's definitely a lot to do, a lot to explore. The lore is super in depth. Sometimes you kind of feel like you have to skip over it if you're in a group and whatnot, but you are more than welcome to take your time, explore the lore, explore the story. And I would actually encourage that because I find that aspect of the game really interesting, as there's so many different storylines to explore. If you're like totally new, when you're coming into it, it feels more like an RPG. So you're creating a character, you're being immersed into this world, and then you need to make decisions. And, these decisions, have some effect on the outcome of your character and, what kind of character you're going to be, which is really cool.
Great overview for the Elder Scrolls Online. You always definitely seem to have a good grasp on the game, as I would imagine. It was always funny when players in the last review that we did, because we did do a full review of the game. If you guys need more depth, you can check that out. Basically, some people said you were casual, but you've played quite a bit of this, right? What's your experience with the Elder Scrolls Online?
Yes, I have played quite a bit. I think in the last review I said I played like 300 hours or something. I don't know where it's gone from there, but we're probably at like 500 now, which is a little bit crazy. But, I think that's one of the great things about the game is I don't really consider myself an expert at this point because there's still a lot of content that I am exploring. And because ESO has been releasing new chapters every year, so I'm looking forward to continuing playing because there's so much content, there's so much story, there's so much to explore, and it's a truly wonderful game. And there's always room for improvement is the other thing. There's, PvE where you're doing solo stuff, there's PvE where you're doing group content, there's PvP, and like all of those need different builds and that are specific. And there's, to optimize yourself for PvP versus PvE takes a lot of work, to be able to distinguish between the two. And, to be a master at PvP is a feat of its own versus to be a master at PvE is a feat of its own. So being able to be a master at both is like crazy and really hard to do, but I am hoping to eventually get there.
Yeah, you've definitely had some impressive things. I remember you coming on a co-stream that we did one time. Hopefully we'll get another one of those set up in the future. And I just to me, I'm like, I have really no idea what I'm doing, but you're very able to guide me along, which is great.
Yeah, I think the game itself is pretty easy to pick up. I think when you're coming into it, it's not hard to learn, but at the same time, it's not one of those games that you pick up, you learn it, and then you're the best at it. If you want to be the best at it, it takes a lot of work. But you can also pick up the game, play it, and just have fun, too.
Which is great. And I feel like we're almost totally off topic here. This is, we're talking about the optimization, but I also felt it was important to get you to kind of talk about, the game itself, just like a bit of an abridged chat of our overall bigger review. Let's talk a little bit about, what this update does, because obviously we're both very impressed with what they've provided here. This is a quality improvement to the game. Let's, maybe talk about some of the areas and just like, like Somerset, where the water and stuff looks really cool, or the forest area where there's, well, one of the forest areas, I guess. I'm not specific on terminology, obviously.
Yeah.
A bit more casual, but, where the shadows really come in, or, when you're talking to characters, the depth of field. Let's, chat a little bit about what you've experienced with this update.
Yeah, for sure. The reflections in Somerset are absolutely gorgeous. And Somerset, is an island, so there's water everywhere. And it's just the visual quality is so amazing. And I like to, run on over to the water and just kind of like peek at my character, and it's pretty good. The graphics are really good. As well, because ESO has so many distinct zones that have, different qualities and environments, the shadows in places like, let's say places like Shadowfen, where it's kind of, there's lots of trees, there's lots of foliage, it's a swampy type area. That area looks absolutely amazing, especially with the improved, what is it, anti-aliasing?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So the forests just look absolutely amazing. As well, like just the resolution in general, you're just able to look at this very picturesque landscape and in so many different areas in Tamriel, which is really cool. And in terms of the draw distance and characters, sometimes previously when you would speak to characters, it's almost like the background is, and you feel like you're almost taken out of, what's going on. Now you can see the character, but the background actually is still super enhanced, but at the same time,
They're very highlighted, and you get a little bit more detail in seeing them as an individual against the backdrop. I think that's what you're getting
yeah,
towards on that.
yes, that's what it feels like, you're really talking to them now, which is cool.
It's a great effect to be had for sure in that one, and we've talked about like the loading and stuff, which is great too. Let's just talk a little bit about kind of preference here. So when I jump into this game, and like most games that I'm seeing improve their open world titles, the 1440 mode at 60 FPS just seems to be like kind of the way to go. You get that fluidity for the combat, the particle effects and everything look really cool and they feel great. And the combat just feels better for adventuring. But I also don't mind sometimes seeing the 4K 30 because it's kind of like, it's more quality picturesque, but I think more of the 60 is kind of where I'm leaning at. Joel, what are your thoughts on, fluidity?
Yeah, in terms of the fluidity, I love the 60 frames per second. I think in terms of combat and the flow of combat, that is perfect where it's at right now, and it's definitely a lot better in this optimized version than it was previously, when it was capped at 30 frames per second. So yeah, 60 frames per second, nice and crisp.
Which is obviously just such an upgrade and a touch up for the game. Just like having that in a combative game. I mean, we've recently seen it with like Skyrim getting the FPS boost. Having that 4K is really good, but then having that fluidity level just makes a game like this, and then especially a game where you compete and play with others, feel a lot better. Especially in the larger scope of those big combative things, you get quite an edge if you have that higher frame rate. At least I feel so. So, in general, let's quickly touch upon, just some of the ways that we, connect and play with others when we're looking at the Elder Scrolls Online.
Yeah, so when you're playing Elder Scrolls Online, I mentioned before there's PvE content and PvP content. So PvE content, there are group dungeons where you have 4 players, usually a tank, a healer, and 2 DPS. And you go into the dungeon, you beat all the bosses, you beat all the ads. There's a story with each dungeon. Lots of fun. Then there's also the bigger group PvE content, which are trials. There are generally 12 people. Usually you have 2 tanks, 2 healers, and 8 DPS. And trials, there's a lot more damage coming onto players, and as well you're expected to output more damage because the bosses have way more health. But yeah, so that's the PvE side of things. I enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. PvP is a little bit more, 1v1. There is Cyrodiil, Imperial City, in which you are part of a faction, you can group up with players in the same alliance that you're in, and you can go take keeps or resources. Basically, you want to try to control as much area as you can, kind of like capture the flag, kind of that kind of feel. And then there's also battlegrounds, which are I like to think of as little mini games where you're on teams of 4 and there's 3 teams total, and you're battling it out, usually for some sort of objective-based thing, whether that be domination, where you're trying to capture flags, chaos ball, where you're trying to hold the ball for the most amount of time, but you take damage from it, or a death match, which is, how many people can you kill, and the team that kills the most people, wins that.
Great. Thank you so much for coming in today and talking about the Elder Scrolls Online. I know you're a big fan of it, and hopefully we'll have you in the near future to work on other content as well.
Yes, that would be lovely. Like I said, I am a big fan of Elder Scrolls, and this new optimization is super duper exciting.
I've been waiting for this.
This is so exciting.
Me too, Lena. I want to learn how to unleash my inner powers.
But before we unleash, we must learn to control.
Please, listen to me for just a moment. It's very important.